Hello, Internet, and all my seat of the pants, off the cuff, ad hoc game masters out there. That's what I'm talking about today. Just gonna take a little inspiration from a recent game I ran myself and talk about ad hoc game master tips. See you on the other side. So, tips for running an ad hoc game. First, we're going to have to define what I mean by an ad hoc game. An ad hoc game is going to be that seat of the pants thing. Every game master, when it comes to more long-term play, should be more organized and should have their game planned out. I'm by no means advocating I come up with it in the flow of the moment, my creative juices are moving style of game mastering. Because I'm just going to tell you, as a general rule, that doesn't work. It falls apart, it has too many holes, it gets exploited, it breaks realism. It's not something that works in any kind of long-term game or any kind of moving campaign situation. However, there are those times when you want to grab a couple of buddies and throw a game together because you're getting together, high school reunion or something. Some people are going to be in town. You want to throw one together real quick. Got a couple of buddies at work you didn't realize played. Want to throw something together, and heck, it might be a couple hours after work, or any other number of reasons. Just you were going to have a barbecue, and the weather was really bad, so you're kind of stuck inside, and you had to order a pizza. But the gang's all there, so hey, we're just hanging out. Let's play Dungeons and Dragons. Let's play Cyberpunk, especially if that's like already your friend group that you're playing with. So that's what I mean by an ad hoc game. An ad hoc game is that quick session where maybe you don't have you got two players out of your normal group, and you're just going to kind of throw together a little side game. So we guys get to play, but it doesn't interfere with our main campaign, or we're playing when we didn't really expect it, or we know it's going to be a one-shot, that sort of thing. Works really great for just kind of throwing something together, doing something a little different. And it also works kind of great for, it's like, we're not really feeling Dungeons and Dragons, which is what our main game is right now, but let's just dust off that Colonies and Conquerors, or dust off that Cyberpunk book. And it's also another thing that's not horrible for playing a newer system that you're kind of getting used to, because it gives you a game that not everybody's super invested in. So that's what I mean by an ad hoc game. It's off the cuff. It's not usually planned. Sometimes you're just kind of throwing something together because some members are missing. This happened to me just the other week. I was playing my regular Cyberpunk game. We had the situation is that I'm playing Cyberpunk Red, and I've got a group that's relatively new to the game. So what I did is I decided that I was going to have quests in my campaign chain that are each tailor fit towards a different, they don't have classes in Cyberpunk Red, but a different role for each of the characters. So that not only is going to give each of my characters some spotlight, but it's also going to put them in situations where they can learn to think about their unique character abilities, and they can use those role abilities to better play their characters as they get used to the game system. And it just so happened that everything I had put together was for my med tech to have her time in the sun, and she was the one player who couldn't show up. So I've got 3 players, and I got my solo who is saying, hey, I'm probably going to have to leave a little early because some stuff has come up, so you're going to have me for about 3 hours, and then you're going to have just 2 players for the other 3. And I'm thrown totally off guard. And I'm like, well, what the hell am I going to do now? Well, you know what? I'm not going to run my MedTech campaign because my MedTech ain't here. I thought up and I said, you know what? Today was the Monaco Grand Prix. Big F1 racing fan. And I was thinking back, and I was like, in Monaco, there's a very famous story where 2 Jaguar F1 cars were promoting the Ocean's 11 movie and had these like priceless diamonds from the De Beers Corporation, these huge diamonds embedded in the front of the cars. One of them, no problem. Another one was involved in an accident, and this uninsured giant gem quality diamond disappeared without a trace, like something out of an Ocean's 11 heist movie. So big mystery. No, never had this. Never been recovered. People have looked for it. Nobody knows where this diamond disappeared to. So it could very well be one of the greatest thefts or scams in history. So what did I do? I'm like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. A section of Night City is shut down these roads. They're going to race around. There's going to be a Grand Prix around this area. But because of the situation with this med tech that has to do with a new street drug that's been introduced and it's causing a lot of death, that there's it's almost like the COVID-19 pandemic, where there's a lot of people who are, for various different reasons staying out of things, and they're having some trouble with the race getting kind of put together. So it gives my fixer the opportunity to potentially race one of these cars. And it just so happens that it's introducing Arasaka back into the area, and this is how he gets in, is he's the last minute driver for this last minute entry for this unknown corporate sponsor, and he is bringing Arasaka. Arasaka is announcing their official presence in Night City again on his car. Well, at the same time, they get approached as they've gone in to do testing and things like that. They get approached about, hey, we're going to steal this item from this gang, and what we want you to do is we just want you to keep it in the nose of the car, and we want you to drop it somewhere on the track. Just, I don't care if it's an accident, I don't care what the situation is, we just need you to, when we tell you to, make sure this gets released. And the party joins, and they go and they do a short, adventure thing, that a short little combat encounter and whatnot, where they acquire this item and take it back. And then my solo's gone, so it's just my fixer and my rocker boy that are out there to do the racing and stuff. And they get an opportunity to, hey, make sure you wreck your car on the 5th lap, and it'll be worth a lot of eddies or whatever. And they run off and have this really cool moment where he drives his car in the race, and he causes a wreck with the Militech car that allows him to discard the package into the bay, and he screws over the people that he was cheating, that were trying to cheat on the betting, and he just really made a cool thing. And it all came from something I knew from being a fan of F1 racing. And that brings me to my first real tip for an ad hoc game as a game master. Use a story that you're familiar with. Pick something that you are intimately familiar with to build as the storyline of your game. It takes a lot out of it. If you are somebody who is into like true crime, and you know about the Great London Diamond Heist, or you know about the Millennium Diamond Heist, or you know it's about some great bank robbery or something, use that. Use something that you are intimately familiar with. Use a book you're familiar with. Use an old movie or something. Like, think back and say, I used to watch anime in the early 90s, and I watched those like bad, ultra-violent animes that had like basically no story or anything. So I'm going to take the shell of a bad story that was MD Geist, and I'm going to turn it into my kind of a road warrior type campaign or something. Or I'm going to turn it into an ad hoc adventure for a D&D game. So use a story that you're very familiar with, particularly if you know a few things that are not going to resonate with the rest of your players. None of my players are F1 racing fans. None of them knew this story. So to them, it was just this really cool idea or something. Me, I'm just basically reliving something that happened 15 years ago to me. The second part is you use a story that doesn't fit. So for instance, I'm taking a story about the Monaco Grand Prix and a diamond in a publicity stunt and moving it into cyberpunk, which is a world of destitution versus the elites, and is, it's racing, so it's not really so much what we're doing right now, especially because we don't even have a nomad. And so you take stuff out of context. You could take that same heist story and plug it into some kind of chariot race, or some kind of cross-country situation. You could take a story like Smokey and the Bandit and turn it into a Wild West stagecoach situation, or you could turn it into a delivery for a Great Baron or something, an urgent message or an urgent package that has to get delivered, and nobody says that you can make this happen because it's across this dangerous terrain, and we have to send out the paladin and his friends to do it. So you take something out of context to make that story even less recognizable to your players just in case, and to add some more unique flavor to it to make it pop. A next thing is a little bit more on selection of enemies for combat encounters. Don't use single monsters or single opponents for the most part. Use groups. It is a lot easier for you to make adjustments with groups that don't seem like you're powering down or powering up an enemy. Because let's face it, you're not putting a tremendous amount of thought into this when you're putting together your game like you would if you were writing an adventure. You're coming up with this on the cuff. And it's a lot easier to send in, say, 5 gnolls and then be like, okay, there's a little bit too much here for this group. They're having some trouble handling this, so I can change their tactics a little bit, or maybe make some adjustments to what their roles should be. It's a lot easier to do that and to slowly manipulate a few out of 4 or 5, or maybe one is going to run away after a certain number one of them dies or something. It's a lot easier to do that than to manipulate something that has more powerful abilities that are just ramping up really quickly. On the other hand, it's also a little bit easier to make them more difficult, because one can run off and call in reinforcements, or one can step back and pull a horn out and blow it, and then the others are coming in. Whereas you just have the one creature, making the one creature become more difficult can be pretty obvious on now the game master is kind of adjusting things because this isn't as hard as he thought it would be, and you start getting players feeling cheated. It's easier to manipulate groups than singles, and it's a lot less likely that you're seriously going to screw up throwing 5 gnolls at a level 3 party than it is that you're going to screw up by throwing a mind flayer at a level 5 party or something of that nature. The next thing is to provide a bailout, to provide bailout items if needed. Think and keep in the back of your head. It's like if you realize that the stuff you've put together, maybe a bunch of stuff's adding up and it's compounding faster than you thought, and you're playing Cyberpunk and your guys are hurt and they had some bad rolls, or they had some weapon damage, or they lost some stuff, and you know that it doesn't even matter how much you kind of par down this final encounter or whatever this final situation is, if you want it to go reasonably well, they're going to need something. I hate to say it, I don't want to tell it like this, but do the old Resident Evil and, oh my God, there's a rocket launcher in this janitor's closet. Don't put a rocket launcher in the janitor's closet. Do a little bit better than that, but find some way to slide them some item or some equipment or something that can give them an edge. Maybe you notice that on the way there's like some kind of switch or something into the room, and you can cut the power, and that's going to cause an issue. Or you can you find a way that you can hear them, and the players can get a view of the room where the bad guy doesn't know they're there, to give them a little bit of an edge. Just keep a bailout in mind, and keep some bailout items on the back of your head. And last but not least, which is going to be the last one that I've got as far as ad hoc game advice, is the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't try to get too elaborate. This is an ad hoc, off-the-cuff thing. We're just trying to have fun here, having to provide a good thing. You might be playing 4 hours, you might be playing 6 hours, you might be playing 3 hours. We're not coming back to finish it later. The last thing you need to do is start trying to weave in more intricate stuff that leaves more questions, and you could have your group be like, oh, we need to go back and finish that game. You think this is a good thing, but you pulled all this stuff out of you. Now you got to find a way to make it all make sense and come together because you tried to put too many elements into it. Or they just don't really get anything completed and they leave the table feeling like it was kind of a waste of time. They really didn't kind of do anything. Probably not going to hold it against you or anything, but it left that feeling of incompleteness. Not that, man, that was kind of a cool game. I'm sure I'm glad it was a storm today. I mean, I hate that we missed out on grilling those burgers and stuff and had to order a pizza, but man, this sure worked out that we had this cool game. And you miss out on that if you try to overcomplicate it. I almost did that the other week because by having I should not have included that guy trying to manipulate the bet. There was no need for that. There was no reason for it. There's no resolution to it. Now I've got a hanging loose end. It's even worse for me because this is actually with characters in my campaign, and I got this weird hanging loose end of these people that got shafted on screwing over this race and wrecking on purpose to fix a bet. And I put that in that game for no reason. It was totally unnecessary. Didn't add any tension or anything. And this is really just a case of me saying I should have just kept it simple, stupid with the two elements that had to do with that story of the race. And I didn't think ahead like that. But I didn't screw it up entirely. I mean, they had a great time and we finished the event and everything and it all worked out well. But if I'd have added one more element or one more twist or had one more fight or something, we would have left a big hanging loose end that would have felt like it was attached on at the last minute anyway, didn't really feel like it should have been there, and it wouldn't have been as memorable or as fun as it was. So, quick recap, use a story you're familiar with. In particular, use a story that doesn't fit with whatever your setting is, that you can then turn around and twist to your setting, and that gives you something you're familiar with that is probably not recognizable to the players. So you've got a good solid storyline that's already there for you, but it's not immediately your players snapping their fingers and picking up on it. Use groups instead of like single enemies, because it's just easier to manipulate, add, subtract, change tactics, that sort of thing to keep the game flowing, to maintain the proper amount of threat without, TPKing 30 minutes in and it just being kind of anticlimactic and feeling like it was stupid. And then, keep some bailout items on hand if you get 2 or 3 encounters in and you realize that you didn't overdo it in a big way, but you overdid it incrementally. You've got ways for them to gain that advantage and get out of it. And then finally, keep things simple. Keep it simple. That is how you do this with these ad hoc, off-the-cuff games. Tell me a story below about a time that you had a quick, one-session, throwaway game that was just kind of pulled out of your back pocket. Tell me how it went. Was it terrible? Was it a tabletop horror story? Was it a tabletop war story? Was it glory and honor and everybody talks about it forever, or does everybody talk about it for the wrong reasons? But like, share, subscribe, click the bell, dance the two-step, wave your middle fingers around, whatever it takes for YouTube to actually pay attention. And leave your comments below, and can't wait to hear from you. See you guys next time.